welcome to Money, 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 your weekly personal finance date with me, Surabhi Upadhyay. 14th November is Children's Day, and that got us thinking. For all the parents out there, there's nothing more important than ensuring a sound and solid, financially secure future for your children. So then, what's the best way to go about it? How much of your investment should be earmarked for your kids? Do you need special child plan, child products, or will your regular investments meet your kids' requirements? Well, financial planning expert Kalpesh Ashar is joining me on the show today to help us make sense of it all. Kalpesh, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining in.
Thank you.
So, you know, it's one of the most critical aspects of financial planning, I guess, right? Because you're always doing it for your family and you're doing it for your children. Your first thoughts on the topic?
So, when we associate financial planning with goals, one of the foremost goals which comes to our mind is retirement, child education planning, and probably in the context people want to buy a house. So today we're going to talk about the center one, which is the child education planning. And as soon as the children's education planning, we talk about it, there's a lot of anxiety, fear and emotions attached to it. So we've seen that many people, when they talk about the children's education planning, all of a sudden, if they are probably an aggressive investor, they tend to soften up when it comes to the word child education planning. And there's a certain amount of reason behind it, because it crops up from the feeling that, we live in a competitive world today. So probably some unexplored desires of the parents, which they haven't been able to do it for themselves. They want it to translate for the kids. And they want to be pretty sure that if not us, but at least our kids should be having it.
Absolutely. And it's not just education, right? Because education is one aspect, and in a traditional Indian setup, you always want the best of the weddings, and you want all sorts of, financial security for your children.
Exactly.
So now the thought process, let's start with the bare basics. How do you determine what's the kind of corpus that you have to start working towards?
See, the main thing is that we all talk about child education planning, but in the context of child education planning also, there are 3 stages. So you talk about preschooling, you talk about schooling, and you talk about the higher education. And all of them come with a different time frame. So you talk about preschooling as such, many parents or to-be parents really don't have a time horizon to look at that. So they are in it, and in today's world, I think every parent wants their kid to be smarter than the other as soon as possible. So the preschooling stage is as early as 2 years or something, and they're into it. And we all know that even the preschooling fees are really a challenge for many people, and they're going up by the day. So they don't have a time to plan for it. So whatever is in their hands right now, they start allocating that resources towards the preschooling part. As far as the schooling part goes, the second stage, we normally, in the context of financial planning, take it as a normal cash flow expense, because it's a continuous expense and it's going to be spread out over a period of 10 years. So that, as per the person's cash flow, he has to allocate the funds according to his affordability levels. And the story just does not end with the tuition fees, because the kids now, as a part of the education, also have specialized courses which they attend to. They have special other activities which they do, extracurricular activities. So all that needs to be provided.
So that's what I'm actually getting to, because it's still easy to plan for the pure hard numbers, the tuition fees, because that's in front of you. You can do your back calculations, you can do your math. I mean, with a child comes obviously a lot of other forms of spending. I wouldn't call it investment, but obviously spending. So how do you then draw the red line? How do you decide what is the sum that you can actually earmark? Whether it's whether it's school accessories, whether it's clothing, whether it's gadgets and equipment. How do you decide what's your cutoff line?
So there's really not a very concrete cutoff line, as you say, but I would generally
a general
thumb rule would be anything in the region of 5 to 10% of your investments, probably which you're earmarking, those are diverted towards the schooling expense. And we all know that probably every parent would not like to step the line and probably go beyond his means to provide that type of a thing, because you don't want to get into flamboyance and all just at the schooling stage, because a bigger chunk of investments has to be allocated towards the third part, which is the higher education.
Absolutely.
And that is probably where people are looking at, and it needs to be looked at, because the higher education corpus is running higher than the normal inflation. So if you have an inflation calculation, which we do today at 7%, the education inflation is moving at 10 to 12%.
Okay.
So even if you say today that if a parent would say that I would like to have 25 lakh rupees set aside for my child's education,
higher education,
and if he is not keeping in consideration the inflation, and he's giving a 10-year time frame, probably at 10 to 12%, he could be looking at a figure of 65 lakh rupees.
And now that's a dramatic change.
And that's a dramatic change. So all his projections could go wrong if he's not wary of those figures at this particular moment.
When do you start planning for higher education? Because it's a goal that seems, well off in the distance. You're talking 10 years later when the child is starting his or her schooling. So when do you start planning for higher education?
So just simple 4 words, as early as possible. Because we all know that any goal which we want to achieve in life, in financial planning context, you should have time on your side. And if you have time on your side, probably the best method to reach it is through equity. And when you say equity, you associate the power of compounding with it. So as early as possible, if you earmark a certain corpus, now it's irregardless of what you set aside at that point of time, but at least the simple awareness that you want to get somewhere and you're on your journey, I think that helps a lot.
So that's an important distinction that you've made, that the schooling fees, the schooling period, that of course is going to be 5 to 10% of your monthly income as a parent.
Correct.
But at the same time you have to start working towards investment, which is going to be of course the longer term objective of higher education.
Perfectly. That's what I'm trying to say.
Out of your total investments that you're doing at this stage as a parent in life, how much should be earmarked towards children's higher education?
So again, we go to a different context, because in life, and when we do financial planning, we also do life planning, a bit of it. There are other important goals. So it's that your retirement is equally important. Absolutely. And it needs to be attended to. So where many people falter, and where I use the word emotions and anxiety and fear, is the parents probably tend to compromise on their retirement goal and divert that money towards education.
Right.
So that creates a hell lot of problems in their sunset years. So I would say that probably when you ask for a certain percentage, if you really have, just as a ballpark figure, if you probably have 3 goals set in your life, long-term goals I'm talking about, probably you have other options also. 20% towards the education expenses is a good figure to start off with.
Okay, 20% of what you're investing on a yearly basis or on a monthly basis. All right. So now that we've got that math clear, the next critical question is, where do you put this money? How do you start investing and building that corpus? That's exactly what we will talk about after the break.